Jack lived in a world where humanity had finally reached the stars, but he certainly wasn't reaping any of the benefits. While the wealthy zoomed around in personal spacecraft and lived in luxury space stations, he could barely afford his tiny apartment in the deteriorating section of New Boston, Earth's largest spaceport city. His morning started like any other with the artificial sunlight streaming through his cracked window and the distant rumble of spacecraft taking off. The rent was due in 3 days, and he had exactly 18 credits to his name. Not even enough for a decent meal, let alone the 500 credits his landlord demanded. As he walked to his job at the spaceport cleaning service, Jack watched the gleaming ships overhead with a mixture of wonder and bitterness. The company he worked for had the contract to clean private vessels, which meant he spent his days scrubbing the ships of beings who had more money than he'd see in 10 lifetimes. That particular morning, while cleaning the exterior of a massive private yacht, Jack noticed something unusual. Through one of the ship's windows, he spotted a tall, blue-skinned alien sitting alone in what appeared to be a luxurious lounge. Nothing strange about that except for the fact that the alien was crying, silver tears streaming down their face. Jack shouldn't have cared. It wasn't his business, and aliens crying probably didn't even mean the same thing as humans crying. But something about the scene struck him. Here was someone who supposedly had everything, looking just as miserable as he felt. He was about to move on when the alien looked up and their eyes met. The alien's eyes widened, all 4 of them, and suddenly Jack's cleaning platform began moving, pulled toward one of the ship's airlocks by some unseen force. Jack's heart raced as the platform docked with the ship. The airlock cycled open, and a melodious voice echoed in his head. "Please, would you come inside? I have a business proposition that could solve both our problems." He knew he should refuse. Entering a private vessel without authorization could cost him his job. But then again, what did he really have to lose? With trembling hands, Jack stepped through the airlock, having no idea he was about to enter into the strangest contract of his life. The alien, who introduced themselves simply as Blue, had a problem that all their wealth couldn't solve: crushing loneliness. Their species was naturally telepathic and empathic, requiring constant emotional connection to maintain mental health. But Blue had been exiled from their home cluster for supporting the wrong political faction, cut off from their collective. "I have observed humans," Blue transmitted directly into Jack's mind. "Your species has remarkable emotional resilience and adaptability. You can form meaningful connections quickly, even with completely different species." Jack listened, fascinated despite himself. As Blue laid out their proposal, they would pay off all of Jack's debts and set him up with a comfortable lifestyle. In return, he would live aboard their ship as a companion, someone to talk to share meals with, to help them understand human culture and emotions. It sounded too good to be true. It probably was. But as Jack stood there in that opulent lounge, looking at the genuine hope in all 4 of Blue's eyes, he realized this might be the opportunity he'd been waiting for his whole life. "I have one condition," Jack said, surprising himself with his boldness. "I want to learn. About space travel, about other cultures, about everything. If I'm going to be your companion, I want to better myself too." Blue's silver tears had dried, and their mouth parts curved into what Jack hoped was a smile. "That is acceptable. More than acceptable, it is admirable. Shall we formalize our arrangement?" And so, on that ordinary morning that turned out to be anything but ordinary, a broke human and a lonely alien struck a deal that would change both their lives forever. The contract was signed with both ink and a drop of Blue's silver tears, binding under both human and alien law. As Jack watched his debts disappear with a few taps on Blue's datapad, he wondered if he just made the best decision of his life or the worst mistake possible. Only time would tell. The first week aboard Blue's ship, the Star Whisper, was nothing like Jack expected. His tiny apartment had been traded for a suite larger than his entire apartment building's floor. The bed adjusted to his exact comfort preferences, and the food synthesizer could create any Earth dish he desired. But luxury wasn't the hard part, learning to live with an alien was. Blue's telepathic abilities meant they could sense Jack's emotions at all times, which led to some awkward moments. When Jack felt homesick on the third night, he found Blue outside his door with a perfectly recreated bowl of his mother's chicken soup, a memory they had plucked straight from his mind. Privacy, Jack had said firmly the next morning. Humans need emotional privacy sometimes. It's like having a closed door for your feelings. Blue's skin had shifted to a darker shade, which Jack was learning meant embarrassment. My species considers emotional privacy a form of isolation, of punishment, they transmitted. But I will learn to respect your human needs. They worked out a system. Blue would maintain a telepathic distance, unless Jack specifically welcomed the connection. It was like learning to knock before entering a room, but for thoughts. The education Jack had asked for began immediately. Blue was an eager teacher, starting with the basics of spacecraft operations. Jack discovered he had a natural talent for understanding spatial navigation, though the complex mathematics behind full space travel made his head spin. Your species is remarkably adaptable, Blue observed one day, watching Jack practice with the ship's holographic control interface. Most beings require months to grasp these concepts. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. During their first meal together, Jack had accidentally violated 3 different alien cultural taboos, eating with his left hand, speaking while the ship's engines were in a particular power phase, and worst of all, complimenting the food before Blue had taken their first bite. How do you keep track of all these rules? Jack had asked, frustrated after another social mishap involving the wrong color clothing during shipboard evening hours. How do you keep track of when to say please and thank you? Blue countered. Cultural rules become invisible once you grow up with them. The biggest challenge came when Blue received a subspace transmission from another ship requesting docking for trade negotiations. It would be Jack's first encounter with aliens other than Blue, and he was nervous. They cannot know the true nature of our arrangement, Blue transmitted privately. To many species, our companionship contract would seem inappropriate. You will be introduced as my cultural advisor. Jack nodded, straightening the formal attire Blue had provided. What species are they? Should I prepare anything specific? They are merchants of the Golden Path, Blue replied. They care only for profit and trade. Be careful, they can smell desperation and weakness like sharks scent blood in water. As the visiting ship docked with the Star Whisper, Jack felt his heart racing. Here he was, a former cleaning service worker, about to participate in high-stakes alien trade negotiations. But when he glanced at Blue, he saw them trembling slightly, their skin rippling with anxiety patterns. In that moment, Jack realized something important. Blue needed him. Not just as a companion to ease their loneliness, but as someone who could help them navigate situations their wealth and status couldn't handle alone. For the first time, Jack felt truly valuable in their arrangement. He reached out and gently touched Blue's arm, a gesture they had established was acceptable. We've got this, he said firmly. Together. Blue's skin shifted to a warm golden hue, gratitude and trust. As the airlock began to cycle, Jack stood tall beside his alien companion, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. He was no longer just a broke human taking a desperate chance. He was becoming something more. The merchants of the Golden Path were nothing like Jack had imagined. They floated into the Star Whisper's meeting room like golden clouds of shimmering dust, each one forming and reforming into vaguely humanoid shapes. Their voices came as whispers that seemed to echo from every direction at once. We bring greetings and opportunities for profit, they said in perfect English, though Jack could see no mouths moving. Though we are intrigued by your unusual crew arrangement. Blue's skin rippled with subtle patterns of concern, but their voice remained steady. My cultural advisor ensures our trades respect local customs across human space. Now, shall we discuss business? The lead merchant coalesced into a more solid form, its golden particles swirling with interest. Indeed. We have rare materials from the edge worlds. Precious metals, exotic matter, and information. At the word information, Blue's posture stiffened. Jack noticed their lower eyes twitching, a tell he learned meant they were deeply worried. The merchants noticed too. Perhaps, the lead merchant whispered. Information about certain political developments in your home cluster? Jack watched as Blue's skin began to pale, a sign of distress. Without thinking, he stepped forward. I believe standard trading protocols require all parties to declare their goods before specific offers are made. He remembered Blue teaching him this rule just days ago. The merchants swirled in apparent surprise. The human speaks with authority, they whispered amongst themselves. Unusual. Most interesting. My cultural advisor is correct, Blue said, their color returning slightly. Declare your complete inventory, or this meeting ends now. The lead merchant's form shimmered with what might have been amusement. Very well. We offer industrial-grade platinum from the mines of Nexus 6, quantum-stabilized exotic matter for drive core enhancement, and correspondence intercepted from the central cluster's diplomatic channels. Jack saw his chance. Interesting selection. However, as Earth's trading protocols state, any diplomatic correspondence offered for trade must be verified by an independent human authority before negotiations can proceed. I'm sure you're aware of the regulations? He was completely bluffing. He had no idea if such a regulation existed. But he spoke with absolute confidence, remembering Blue's words about the merchants being able to smell weakness. The golden beings swirled in agitation. Such verification would be inconvenient. Then perhaps we should focus on the platinum and exotic matter, Jack suggested smoothly. Unless you'd prefer to end our meeting? The lead merchant's form contracted slightly. The human's point is valid. Let us discuss the tangible goods. Over the next hour, Jack watched in amazement as Blue negotiated a complex trade deal. They exchanged some rare minerals from the Star Whisper's cargo hold for the platinum, which Blue later explained would be worth 5 times as much in other markets. After the merchants departed, Blue turned to Jack, their skin now glowing with a mix of relief and gratitude. That was impressive. How did you know to invoke human trading protocols? I didn't, Jack admitted. I made it up. I just figured they wouldn't want to risk breaking rules they didn't know about. Blue's skin rippled with patterns Jack had never seen before. He later learned it was their equivalent of laughter. You outbluffed the merchants? Do you realize how rare that is? I just didn't want them using my presence as an excuse to pressure you, Jack said. Though I probably should learn the actual trading rules for next time. Next time, Blue transmitted thoughtfully. Yes, I believe there will be many next times. You have a natural talent for this, Jack. Perhaps our arrangement can be more than just companionship. Would you be interested in becoming my official trade negotiator? Jack grinned. From cleaning ships to negotiating deals on them, life had certainly taken an unexpected turn. I'd like that. But first, you need to teach me everything you know about galactic trade. I can't bluff my way through every deal. Agreed, Blue said, their skin glowing warmly. Though I must admit, watching you bluff was highly entertaining. As they headed to the ship's library to begin Jack's education in galactic economics, he realized that he was actually looking forward to the challenges ahead. He wasn't just surviving anymore, he was thriving. 3 months into their partnership, Jack had learned more about galactic trade than he'd ever thought possible. Blue was an excellent teacher, and Jack's quick thinking had helped them secure several profitable deals. But with success came complications. One quiet evening, as they shared a meal in the ship's dining room, Blue's skin suddenly turned ashen gray, a color Jack had never seen before. They collapsed forward, catching themselves on the table's edge. Blue! Jack rushed to their side. What's wrong? A psychic echo, Blue transmitted weakly. From home. The collective, they're in pain. Great pain. Jack helped Blue to a nearby chair, his mind racing. Despite their months together, Blue rarely spoke about their home cluster or the political exile that had brought them here. Now, watching his friend tremble, Jack realized how much that silence had cost them. Tell me, Jack said softly. Tell me everything. Blue's skin rippled with patterns of old grief as they finally shared their story. Their home cluster had been divided by a political struggle between traditionalists who wanted to maintain their isolated society and progressives who sought to open trade with other species. Blue had been a prominent voice for change, arguing that their society's emotional dependency made them vulnerable. The traditionalists won, Blue transmitted. They labeled us traitors, claimed we would destroy our way of life. The exile wasn't just physical, they severed our psychic connections to the collective. It's like having your soul torn in half. But you still feel them? Jack asked. Only echoes, and only in moments of great collective distress. Blue's color slowly began to stabilize. Something is wrong in the cluster. The echo felt like fear. Desperation? Jack thought about the merchant's earlier offer of political information. Could the traditionalists' policies be causing problems? Almost certainly. Our society needs resources we can't produce ourselves. Without trade. Blue's transmission trailed off. Just then, the ship's communication system chimed. An encrypted message was coming in on a frequency Jack had never seen before. Blue's skin shifted to deep purple shock and recognition. That's a resistance frequency. From home. They opened the message together. It was brief but clear. The traditionalist government was failing. Trade restrictions had led to critical shortages. The resistance, former progressives who had avoided exile, was gaining support. They needed Blue's help to negotiate emergency trade agreements before their society collapsed. They want me to come back. Blue transmitted, their skin swirling with conflicting colors. To help save the very people who exiled me. Jack watched his friend struggle with the decision. He thought about everything he'd learned about trade, about diplomacy, about bridging differences between cultures. You know, he said carefully, they're not just asking for you anymore. They're asking for us. Blue's colors stabilized slightly. What do you mean? Think about it. You understand their needs, their culture. I understand how to negotiate with outsiders, how to find middle ground. Together, we might be able to help your people transition to open trade without losing their cultural identity. It would be dangerous. Blue warned. The traditionalists still hold power. And for you, you'd be the first human to ever visit our cluster. The psychic atmosphere alone could be overwhelming. Jack smiled. More overwhelming than living with you these past months? Besides, isn't this why we work well together? You help me navigate space, I help you navigate change. Blue's skin began to glow with a warm, deep gold hope mixed with affection. You would do this? Risk everything to help my people? That's what friends do, Jack said simply. And maybe this is why we met. Not just to help each other, but to help bring positive change to both our societies. As they set coordinates for Blue's home cluster, Jack felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. They were about to attempt something unprecedented, helping an isolated, psychically linked society open itself to the galaxy. It would be their greatest challenge yet. But looking at Blue, seeing their skin shimmer with renewed purpose, Jack knew they would face it together. From broke human and lonely alien to potential saviors of a civilization, life really did work in unexpected ways. The journey to Blue's home cluster took 2 weeks through fold space. During that time, Blue prepared Jack for what they would face. Their civilization lived on massive space stations orbiting a dying star, each station connected to the others through a web of psychic energy. The moment we enter cluster space, Blue warned, you'll feel it. The collective consciousness is like an ocean, beautiful, but it can drown the unprepared. Jack spent hours in meditation, practicing the mental shields Blue taught him. Still, nothing could have prepared him for the reality. As they crossed the cluster's boundary, it hit him like a tidal wave, millions of minds connected in a vast network of thoughts and emotions. He stumbled, grabbing the nearest wall for support. Colors and feelings washed through his mind: fear, hunger, anger, hope, desperation. Blue steadied him with one hand, their skin pulsing with concern. I'm okay, Jack managed, though his head was spinning. It's intense. You're doing remarkably well, Blue transmitted. Most non-psychic species would be unconscious by now. They approached the central station, a massive structure that gleamed like a pearl in the red light of the dying sun. As they drew closer, Jack noticed something odd about the other stations. Many were dark, their usual luminescence dimmed. Power shortages, Blue explained grimly. Without trade, they can't maintain full operations. My people are suffering. A transmission came through, crisp and formal. Exile Blue, you are cleared to dock at Emergency Base 7. Your companion's presence has been noted. The Council awaits. The landing bay was crowded with Blue's species, tall, elegant beings with skin that rippled in patterns of blue and silver. But unlike Blue, their colors were muted, their movements sluggish. Jack could feel their collective despair pressing against his mental shields. The council chamber was a vast, circular room. 12 leaders sat in a ring, their skin displaying identical patterns of authority and tradition. In the center stood the resistance contact who had summoned them, a being whose skin shifted between hope and fear. Exile Blue. The head counselor's thoughts boomed through the chamber. You return in our hour of need, despite our previous actions. And you bring a human, of all beings. Explain yourself. Blue stepped forward, their skin radiating confidence. Honored Council, I bring not just any human, but a master trade negotiator who understands both our needs and the ways of the galaxy. Together, we can save our people without sacrificing our culture. Murmurs of doubt rippled through the chamber. A human cannot understand our ways, one counselor transmitted. They are emotionally primitive, focused only on material gain. Jack felt their dismissal like a physical blow, but he stayed calm. Instead of speaking, he did something Blue had taught him. He carefully lowered his mental shields, just enough to let them feel his genuine concern for their people, his friendship with Blue, his desire to help. The chamber went silent. The counselor's skin patterns shifted rapidly as they processed this unexpected emotional depth from a human. Impossible, the head counselor transmitted. How can you? I've lived with Blue for months, Jack said quietly. I've learned that different doesn't mean primitive. Your society values emotional connections. Humans value adaptability and innovation. Together, those strengths could save your people. He pulled out a data pad, his hands steady despite the pressure of millions of minds around him. I have preliminary trade agreements from 17 different species. All are willing to work within special protocols that respect your psychic sensitivities. You don't have to choose between tradition and survival. You can have both. The council chamber erupted in a chaos of colors and emotions. Hope warred with fear, tradition with necessity. Through it all, Jack stood firm beside Blue, their combined stability a beacon in the emotional storm. Finally, the head counselor raised their hands for silence. Perhaps, they transmitted slowly, we have been too rigid in our thinking. Exile Blue, you and your human will present these trade proposals. But know this: if they threaten our way of life in any way, the consequences will be severe. As they left the chamber, Blue's skin glowed with pride. You did well, they transmitted privately to Jack. But this is just the beginning. The real challenge starts now. Jack nodded, already planning their next moves. They had opened the door, now they just had to prove that change didn't mean destruction, that different cultures could make each other stronger. Their unlikely partnership might just save a civilization. The next week tested Jack and Blue to their limits. Each day brought endless meetings with council members, trade representatives, and station administrators. Jack's head constantly throbbed from maintaining his mental shields in the psychic atmosphere, but he refused to show weakness. The breakthrough came during a demonstration of their first small-scale trade agreement. A merchant vessel from the Crystalline Collective arrived, carrying desperately needed power cells. Jack had specifically chosen them as the first traders. Their crystalline nature made them naturally resistant to psychic energies. The station's inhabitants watched in fascination as the crystal beings efficiently unloaded their cargo without disrupting the psychic atmosphere. More importantly, they followed every protocol Jack and Blue had established, maintaining proper emotional distance, and using the specialized communication systems they'd designed. You see? Blue addressed the council. We can adapt trade to our needs, rather than adapting ourselves to trade. The head counselor's skin showed patterns of reluctant admiration. Perhaps. But this is one ship, one species. How can we be certain others will be as accommodating? Jack stepped forward, fighting his exhaustion. Because we've already done the hard part. Every species I contacted knows this is a test run. They're watching, waiting to see if they can access your markets. They'll follow any reasonable protocols for the chance to trade with you. He pulled up a holographic display showing the station's power levels. Your energy reserves are up 15% from just this one shipment. Imagine what regular trade could do. The council chamber filled with rippling patterns of hope as the implications sank in. But one counselor's skin darkened with concern. And what of our culture? Our unity? Already I sense our young ones dreaming of the stars, of alien ways. Change doesn't mean loss. Blue transmitted firmly. Look at Jack and me. We've learned from each other, grown stronger together. He understands our ways better than many non-psychic species ever could. And I've learned that reaching outward doesn't mean losing what's within. Jack felt a shift in the collective consciousness around them like a breeze freshening stale air. The younger generation's excitement was infectious, their hopes for the future brightening the psychic atmosphere. The head counselor rose, their skin displaying complex patterns Jack had never seen before. We have deliberated through the collective link. Our decision is made. They paused, building tension in the chamber. Exile Blue, your exile is hereby ended. You and your human partner will oversee our transition to open trade, under strict protocols to protect our cultural integrity. The chamber exploded in swirls of color and emotion. Jack felt his mental shields wavering under the assault of joy and relief flooding the collective consciousness. Blue steadied him with one hand, their own skin glowing with happiness. There is one more matter, the head counselor transmitted. Jack of Earth, you have proven that humans are capable of understanding our ways. Would you consider accepting a permanent position as our chief trade negotiator? We would grant you full citizenship rights, including limited access to the collective consciousness. Jack looked at Blue, whose skin showed swirls of hope and uncertainty. I accept, he said without hesitation. On one condition. Blue remains my partner in all negotiations. We work best as a team. The head counselor's skin rippled with amusement. That was never in question. Your partnership is precisely why we trust this endeavor can succeed. Later, watching from the observation deck as more trading ships arrived, Jack reflected on how far he'd come. From cleaning ships to helping save an entire civilization, all because he'd taken a chance on an unexpected deal. Having second thoughts? Blue transmitted, joining him at the window. Not one, Jack replied, smiling as he felt the gentle brush of Blue's mind against his. Though I have to admit, this isn't quite what I expected when I stepped through your airlock that first day. Blue's skin shimmered with patterns that Jack now recognized as affection and contentment. The best deals, they transmitted, are the ones that exceed all expectations. Together, they watched the ships dock, each one bringing new opportunities, new connections, new hope. The broke human and the lonely alien had found not just prosperity, but a purpose bigger than themselves. Sometimes, Jack realized, the most unlikely partnerships could change the universe.